Hey, welcome to Genre Exposure, a film podcast. Join us as we explore the wide world of cinema, broaden our horizons one movie at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Dustin, and welcome to my J-Horror Journal. If you're tuning in on the day of drop for this episode, it is Christmas Day. So if you celebrate it, Merry Christmas. If you don't, Happy Holidays, enjoy whatever other relevant holiday you care about. Or don't, or just do your normal thing and it's whatever, it's cool. If you've been keeping up on the podcast, you know Jason's on vacation for this month, and potentially in January too, we're getting my J-Horror Journal, my little solo spinoff where I just talk about and rant about J-Horror, Japanese films that I enjoy or am new to discovering. And today we cap off kind of the first project for this little side thing, which was the Death Forest franchise. Probably not the best start I could have picked, but I did it on a whim, and here we are, 5 films in, and we're going to finish it. And I'm really excited to talk about this one because, should I spoil that? Yeah, I think this one is somehow the best in the whole franchise, which is weird. It's weird and it's crazy, and we'll get into that more, but first, we're going to do all the usual stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been watching, and we are part of the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, and we love it. And there's all these other cool shows you can go and check out and see what they're doing, see what they're getting into. Find you some cool stuff to listen to enjoy, and pass these cold winter nights as they are. So as far as what I've been watching, I haven't had a lot of time, had a lot of stuff going on. One of my cats has been sick. Luckily, nothing as serious as the situation earlier this year. We just had to take her to the vet. Been having to give her some meds, but she is on the mend and doing good, but that did cut into the old freewheeling film watching time, so I made a little bit of time to revisit some just general Christmas horror films that I enjoy. Ones that I try to get to every year if I can, if I have the time, so I revisited Michael Dougherty's Krampus from 2015. Much known, much beloved. I know Jason enjoys it a ton. You know, it's one, the first time I watched it, I really didn't care for it that much, and I'm not sure why. And kind of every few years, I go back to it, and I find that I enjoy more and more about it. Really, my favorite stuff is, like, kind of the chaotic bits of, like, the toys and stuff like that. I love all of the, like, puppets and giant doll monsters and stuff. Those are just fucking crazy. But, you know, I love the idea of Krampus, so to be this, like, kind of like the definitive film for that entity, it's a lot of fun, and I always enjoy it, and I come to respect it more and more and more as I revisit it each year. I don't want to say too much more else about that, because it's well-treaded ground. My other Christmas rewatch, which is like probably my favorite Christmas time film to get into, Gremlins. 1984, Joe Dante. You know it, you love it, I'm sure. If somehow you have stumbled upon this podcast and you've never seen it, it's a must-see film, I think, really, like, you just gotta experience it. So much fun, so much, like, heart warmth and love in it, but also, like, great moments, great scares, great visual effects, especially with Gizmo and the other Gremlins. Dude, I just love it top to bottom, and it's one of those things, like, I don't feel like it's actually Christmas until I watch this, and I see some of those moments, you know, especially once all the Gremlins are on the loose and their antics begin, and we get them Christmas caroling. All their antics in the bar, at the movie theater, going to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Just love it start to finish. And then I always try to catch Gremlins 2 closely around New Year's, again, for the same reason. A little, like, connecting piece of, like, the time of when it's set. So yeah, super fun. I do want to follow up on one of the things from last time, which is the Creep tapes. The current continuation of the Creep franchise with Mark Duplass in the center role as our unknown creep. So last time I talked about these and I was like, you know, they're fun, they're a little too short, maybe a little too, like, derivative of the formula for the films. And I didn't really know where it was going to go, and I think at the time I recorded that I had seen maybe the first 3. Of which for this season there ends up being like 6. So the 4th one, it was enjoyable, but it was kind of in that same vein of like, you didn't really wow me or like didn't feel like anything that was like fresh with this idea. However, the fifth and sixth episode are fucking amazing in both that they kind of do something new, and also they kind of start to address some of the backstory of this character. The fifth episode, I won't spoil these, but just to kind of set them up a little bit, the fifth one, it really gets into this, like, it's one of his, like, usual sticks, right? He's rented a hotel room, he's hired a guy that's supposed to come over and film him for some kind of BS that he's made up, and then he's going to kill him, of course, because that's what you do in this film franchise, and, yeah, so, like, he's waiting for the guy never shows up, he's late, we get to see him go through the whole cycle of, like, agonizing over the fact that this dude's, like, screwing him over. We get these weird things that start happening. Someone shows up at the door and it's not the right person. And it's someone that's, you can tell they're trying to have some kind of, like, stealthy hotel meetup with someone, but they picked the wrong room. And then he tries to, like, rope him into his BS when the dude's not having it. But then the core of the episode comes into the whole aspect of the, like, Peach Fuzz persona, the wolf mask, and that whole angle of, like, what's going on. And it gets really weird, really surreal, really out there as he kind of comes and confronts his, like, mental state and why he's doing what he's doing. So I thought it was really interesting, really clever, really exciting. And then the sixth film, I say film, but really when I think about this, which we'll talk about in a minute, like, I wonder if this should have just been like a anthology film instead of, like, broken up as a TV show. But the sixth and final episode, our lead, the titular creep, decides to go and visit his mother. And this really starts to get into some of the backstory of why he is the way he is. It starts to peel back that onion a little bit, and he's no longer just this mystery character. And they do a good job of, like, they show a lot, they don't tell a lot, and it gives you ideas of why he's so fucked up. But it never really, never gives you, like, a definitive answer about anything. And it's also, like, one of the fucking funniest ones because, surprisingly, in the universe of this story, like, a lot of his weird, very quirky humor apparently came from his mother. So she's just as odd and just as, like, interesting and crazy. And yeah, we get to learn a lot about him. Lots of little, like, puzzle pieces that you could then go on to try to speculate more about who he is and what's going on with him. And it was just really cool. And it was the perfect way to deliver that of, like, not giving it all out, but giving you enough that it, like, intrigues you and drags you in more. And it even gives a little more of, like, his, like, the filming part and why there's an obsession with that. And there's some of these hilarious moments where apparently he's really obsessed with the film Forrest Gump. And there's this great part where he goes into this whole thing of, like, accusing his mother of doing something when he was a kid that traumatized him. And he, like, really, really tries to sell it. And the next thing you know, she points out the fact that it's a scene from Forrest Gump, and he's just trying to, like, pretend that it's his life. And, oh god, it was just so good. And Mark Duplass is just so amazing as this character. I hope there's more. I hope there's another season, another film. I don't know where they're going to go with it, but even though it kind of had a little bit of a weak start in my book, I think overall the Creep Tape's super awesome. If you love the two films, it's a must-watch. But I do wonder, like, it was 6 episodes, they're about 20-something minutes each. 3 hours is pushing it for a film, but if this was just a film and you just watched it all in one shot, just start to finish, like, I think it would work really well. I mean, you do have, like, the chaptered moments of, like, what each episode would be because it's a different tape of his. I don't know. Maybe that would have been a better way, maybe not. But regardless, it got out there, and it's cool, and it's on Shudder, and you can check it out now. But now that I've officially weighed in on the Creep Tapes, I think that we can get into our movie for today. Alright, so today we're finishing the Death Forest franchise, talking about Death Forest 5, also known as Death Forest Forbidden Forest 5, from 2016. Right out the gate, everything is different here. Right in the trailer, it's made clear this is going to be set in Tokyo. Our denizens from the Death Forest are making their way into the big city for once. We've got a whole new cast, of course, because our only reoccurring character that lives is Kazuki Uchida. And we've got a pair of directors this time, Yohei Fukuda and Yuka Tanaka. Now, with Tanaka, he's not done too many other things. He's done some entries in a horror franchise called Paranormal Surveillance Camera. I've seen clips from them. It's very low budget. It's unsurprisingly all presented as surveillance camera footage, but something creepy happens. They're fun. They're just, a little forgettable. But Yohei Fukuda, now he's done some stuff that's pretty cool. He did some segments in Ura Horror, which was a anthology horror film, probably most notable for having the involvement of Koji Shiraishi, which is, one of our guys, king of found footage stuff. Fukuda also did the 2 Death Tube films, which are really fun, low-budget J-horror flicks. And he did One Chanbara, Bikini Samurai Squad, which is this crazy, very exploitative, over-the-top film adaptation of a video game that's basically just sexy girls and scantily clad outfits with katanas and machine guns, and they're fighting hordes of zombies. It's over the top, it's stupid, it's probably offensive to a lot of people, but it's pretty enjoyable. So I know it got a DVD release over here back in the day, but I think it's pretty much kind of faded into obscurity. And Fukuda's done a lot more too. He's got all kinds of he's done all kinds of direct-to-video horror stuff, entries in horror franchises that are kind of lower budget. He's done stuff for the Honto ni Atta series. He's done this series called Death File. It looks like it's a sort of an anthology horror thing as well. Not a prominent, a legendary director of Japanese horror, but he puts in the work and he puts in the time, so I think that his involvement is really felt on this film. The cast, I'm not going to super detail each person, especially because the kind of IMDb cast list that you can find out there for this film is woefully incomplete. But there were some bigger stars I noticed among the cast that I wanted to highlight. So we have among the cast Honoka Nagai, which you're going to recognize her from one of the Sushi Typhoon flicks, 2009's Vampire Girl vs. Frankenstein Girl, which is, all of those, super fun and super over-the-top and stupid. Another of the central female cast is played by Manaka Kinoshita. I noticed her right away because she has a role in Shion Sono's The Forest of Love. That was the film he did for Netflix, and then it's got the extended version that they presented as a TV series. And she's also one of the key people in one of the Werewolf game films, which, if you've casually kept up with the whole show all the way, you know that I am obsessed with those. I think they're ridiculous, and I think they're super fun. She was in 2017's The Werewolf game Madland, which, God, I would love to talk about those on here, but there are 10 of them, so it would be a big to-do, but file that away for the rainy day folder sometime. But probably arguably the biggest star among the cast for me was Hiroe Igeta. She is in quite a few films that she's done, more dramas or romances or that kind of thing, but what I really know her for, and probably a lot of tokusatsu fans will, is that she plays Yua Yaiba from Kamen Rider 01, which was the start of the Reiwa era Kamen Rider series. Came out 2019, and not only is she one of the central main characters, she is sort of one of the first, what we consider a main character Kamen Rider that is a female. She transforms into Kamen Rider Valkyrie, and is just a complete and total badass. I only mentioned that so I now have the excuse to put some clips from the show in the show notes. Definitely check those out. She was just incredible in this series. Really paved the way for now, most of the newer Since then, the Reiwa era Kamen Riders, they always make at least one, if not more, central female characters become a Kamen Rider. And it's really cool. It's a really fresh change from, like, there were some now and again before then, either like a villain or like tertiary supporting character. But your core, like we would say, like the 2 or 3 main characters of each Kamen Rider series, usually it's all dudes. So it's a cool shake up to the formula, and it's brought a lot of fresh air, I think, in some of the newer seasons of the show. And I had mostly only known Igeta from Kamen Rider 01, so it was cool to see her act in like a low budget horror film. Now, as for the movie itself, right out of the gate, you get the feeling that this is going to be something different. We've got really nice, like, I'm not going to say like best ever camera quality, but it's you can tell it's a better film quality than the prior 4 films. Everything is well lit, everything looks nice. It's got, the kind of the slick HD vibe to it. We get this cool opening in Shibuya Crossing, which is a big, massive crosswalk in Shibuya in Tokyo. If you've watched any other Japanese media stuff or films, even for a little bit, you've probably come across this. So we get a lot of cool shots of just people living their life in Shibuya. It shows us a few different groups of people that some are just bystanders, some will be important later. Our central group is, we've got a gaggle of schoolgirls on their way home. They show us some like older 20-somethings that are kind of just hitting up the bars and having a good time. We're introduced to some idol otaku, some fans of like idol singers. They're doing their thing. They even managed to squeeze in some foreigners, like, some various people visiting, because Shibuya is a very popular spot. And especially for tourism and tourists and stuff, they're always going to be visiting there to check that out. And we get some like text on the screen too that gives us some setup stuff. It's presented as like internet chatter or like message board stuff, but we learn that there's been a series of disappearances going on in Shibuya. People are just vanishing into thin air, and they don't know what's causing it. Police think this may be a murderer on the loose or something, but they also can't find any of the bodies. Some people are talking about seeing like these ghosts. There's talks of like, the floating head, which of course we know is Yoshie. And then some people have found like Kazuki's blog where he's posting a lot of the info he had researched about these entities, but he has apparently gone missing and no one knows where he is either. So, which did make me nervous at first, because again, I was like, oh, we're gonna, ash our kind of central through line for the franchise. I don't know, but it was such a better presentation out of the gate that I was kind of like, okay, I'll let you cook on that and see where that goes. And then at the same time, we've also got a group of cops that are investigating these disappearances. And from their angle, they've got one guy that's like, he's older and his wife vanished due to these incidents, leaving him with their young daughter to raise on his own. And he's kind of become broken from this and is very like ready to go renegade at a moment's notice to kind of crack the case. And he has them very actively looking for Kazuki, because he clearly seems to be the one where all these stories have originated from. And he suspects that he may be the killer or the person abducting these people. Or if not, he can give them, sort of the whatever truth they're looking for to find out who the culprit is. We get a cool scene then of, it's the 20-somethings. They're kind of hanging out in the alleyway. They're just talking about what they got going on, what it's doing though. And this kind of, one other character that's focused on in the intro is this sort of like heavyset dude who's just like slosh drunk. He's walking around with a drink in hand, just chugging it. And so this dude wanders into the alley where they're at and happens to stumble across them. They kind of just hassle him a little bit, and then he kind of like drunkenly stumbles into one of them, is talking about seeing, this big floating head, all this other stuff being weird and crazy. And so they kind of just beat him up, knock him around a little bit, drop him on a pile of trash, take a photo of him, laugh about it, and they walk off. And then we get this great sequence of like, he's laying there drunk, and we keep getting his POV of the moon, and the moon is like full, and every time it cuts back to his POV, the moon's getting bigger and bigger. And then it finally shows us what's going on, and it's actually Yoshie in the sky, like coming down to devour him. And she sort of chomps him, and that's when we get the title screen. This kill, and then the first few kills into the film, like they're very still the cutaway style where you don't see any gore. But there is gore in this film, which is another plus I'm definitely going to give it, that they kind of swung it back to having some more, special effectsy, creepy stuff going on. So then we pick up with our schoolgirls. It's a trio that we're really focused on. Hannah, who has seen some of these ghostly entities and is afraid of them, and then her friends Yui and Nanase. And it kind of feels like early on we're setting up for Yui to sort of be our central main character of this film. But they make some interesting choices, so we'll get into that. So the early part's a lot of build-up. This one is like 90 minutes long or so they got a little bit more runtime to play around with. They can actually, slightly develop these characters, slightly build a plot, and they'll just have to run right into a resolution. So we learn more about them. They're trying to figure out what's scaring Hannah, trying to help her. Some of the idol otaku are like on the net reading about these disappearances, wondering what's going on. And they kind of make this pledge to do what they can to try to help people out in the city. Just because they're nice, well-meaning individuals, I guess. It was a little weird at first because the way they present it's almost like that, I'm a nice guy vibe. But no, they're actually really just, sincere nerds that want to help people, surprisingly so. That was a refreshing swerve on that point. So yeah, we get some, more of the police musing about Kazuki, trying to find him. There's no trace of anything. We see some of the mysterious old woman, which in the earlier film seems to kind of herald Yoshie and the Stalkers and when their appearances and who they go after, but to date they've not figured out like what her connection is in all of this. I think notably in the prior film, Kazuki kind of spoke to her and she told him to like kind of abandon this and look away and stop looking into it, but who knows? He's gone now, so whatever. So we get a little bit more development on like how things are working with these creatures, because they're supposed to be bound kind of to the forest area, but they kept spreading. So people don't see them. Like everyone doesn't see them. Only certain people will notice them. And then it seems that whenever they kill someone, other people there, if they've seen it happen, to them it looks like the person just disappears into thin air in like a poof of smoke. But then they can see the entities. So we have this really creepy scene at, it's like after school time, they're headed home, it gets late, it gets dark, and it's Hannah and Yui, and Hannah sees Yoshie, and they're trying to like help her, but they don't know what's going on because they can't see it. And so then she sort of chomps Hannah, and it's like in half chomp, like she takes her upper body and leaves like everything from the waist below. And so for Yui, it's like there's this puff of smoke, and then all that's there is just the lower body of Hannah and like a shower of gore around it from the bite. Really creepy moment, really intense. And just overall, there's some great fucking like just horror moments in this one where they'll have sort of the stalkers chasing people down alleyways or like doing really creepy stuff where they sort of like emerge out around a corner slowly. The scene I'm talking about in the moment. So Yui takes off running, and we get this awesome chase of like Yoshie floating up between the buildings, and they do some really cool things. Like at one point, she stops in a crosswalk, and then you see like this, but it's positioned low and kind of angled up and diagonally, so you're seeing like from under Yui's face a little bit, but you can see up behind her shoulders into the sky. And so then Yoshie kind of slowly peers out from behind the building and then just zooms in on her and comes after her. And there's a great scene where she like runs her into a tunnel, and she will like fly over and be at the other end waiting for her to come out, and like bounces her back and forth and keeps her stuck. So in the end, she's getting cornered and doesn't really have anywhere she can flee to. And one of those idol otaku show up and happen to save her. We learn this dude's name is Sato, and he's uncovered the fact online that apparently light repulses these creatures, and so he uses a really bright flashlight to run her off. And he gives her some more info about, like, we can meet up and talk about this, and I can try to let you know what's going on. At the same time that's going on, we've also got another cool scene where it's another one of the nerdy guys, and he's got one of the stalkers after him, and he hides in a bathroom and is like looking online for help, and he finds this guy who's like tweeting about these ghosts, and he contacts him, and they kind of have some back and forth dialogue, and he tells him like the rules, of like they thrive on dark places, they don't come out in the daytime, they're repulsed by really bright lights, that kind of stuff. And so this character, he's sort of just like been online researching, and there's some really funny things because he has like the whole like multi-monitor setup, and so when it cuts to him and he's talking, he's got all these windows open, and you can see it's like different articles and news and all this stuff. And one little corner window is like a YouTube video of someone playing the Death Forest game. So I thought that was a clever way to like swing it all back around and incorporate the game into the narrative of the film. So our nerdy dude goes out, and he ends up rescuing the guy and saves him, and then gets him out of trouble. And so everyone of note is kind of safe at this point. We go into the next day. The police make a move and finally capture the dudes from the start of the film that were beating up on the guy, the drunk guy, because they think that he killed him because the guy vanished. There was blood in the scene. They found a security camera that showed them beating him up. And then when they abduct him, they found the pictures on his phone that he had taken of the dude after they had kicked his ass. So they're like, why do you have these photos of him? And so he's trying to like explain about this ghost thing, and it intrigues the one kind of rogue cop. But they're like, we need like solid evidence to work on. So they're making progress, but they're still kind of at a dead end. And everything kind of comes to a head because Yui and Nanase go to see Sato to learn about whatever happened to Hannah. And he kind of gives them like a bunch of the info dump of like stuff people should know that don't. Mostly this things that Kazuki had compiled and put out online. That, they resided in Aokigahara. Then they were sighted at nearby schools and then nearby villages. And it seems like their range has continued to expand to now at the point they're in Tokyo for some reason. Tells them about the lights, tells them about everything else, and he lets them know that there's kind of this group that's been formed of like people that know what's going on and want to do something about it, but they don't know what to do, and they're kind of making like a little united, almost like gang, to try to deal with the problem. And so he invites them to come to that, and maybe all together they can figure something out. And then that group that is being formed, they kind of get a bunch of people to go out in the streets and start canvassing looking for Kazuki, because they've also come to the conclusion that they need to find him if he's still alive and see if he can give them any more info or help them somehow. So the race is on. You've got the police looking for Kazuki. Everyone just out in the streets are looking for him. And then we surprisingly get a sighting of him. He appears to be this haggard homeless man now. He's got a beard. His hair's growing out all along. He's in like junky clothes. And it seems like he's just been driven to the point of insanity and kind of just gave up on his research. But a woman notices him and happens to just catch the look in his eye and match it to the photo. And she calls it into the cops. So they go out and pick him up before anyone else can find him. And so they're questioning Kazuki. They're trying to, figure out what's going on. They realize that he doesn't really know too much more. And they're, of course, being the police, reticent to believe this whole, like, ghost story that's going on. Other than our rogue cop, which does believe him and kind of wants to bring him into the fold with this group, because the rogue cop is also a part of it. But he's clearly not guilty of anything, so they kind of just have to let him go. So then we get our big, like, everybody links up together, and it's the amalgamation of all the different little groups we've been following, kind of heralded by the super smart guy who had been researching. And so he's prepared all this gear for them. They have these big, like, halogen flood lamp lights that they're going to use. And their goal is basically just to try to make everyone aware they need to stay out in the light, avoid the darkness. And kind of the conclusion of what's going on is that, like, apparently it's like when you're in despair or emotionally upset or kind of worn down mentally is when these entities can, like, actually come after you. And so that's why they're invisible to a lot of people. And then sometimes, like, when someone near to them dies, the other people, their loved ones or friends, can then see the entities, because that's like emotionally kind of weakened their spirit in the same way. Which leads them to the conclusion that the entities being here in Tokyo is bad because it's a big city, there's tons of people, and plenty of people that are unhappy or have bad shit going on that they can prey upon. At that moment, as they're kind of making plans about what to do, and they kind of want to go around and just get like all the lights on in the city as possible and kind of try to like flood them out. But the power goes off to the building they're in. It gets flooded with stalkers. Everyone's trying to mount and escape. There's some really cool scenes here of like, we get some of them that go to a parking garage and get into a vehicle, and we have a cool chase scene where they're driving and they have the back doors open, and they're using a camera to try to repulse stalkers. And we got two girls that hide, and they get stumbled upon by like a security guard. And there's this cool thing where like a stalker's approaching, and he keeps like putting the flashlight there, making him freeze, but doesn't know he's there. And then he'll like jerk it back somewhere else, and then he runs up a little more on the girls. And they actually like bait the cop into being the victim so they can get away. But as all of this is going on, the schoolgirls, Yui and Nanase, get separated from the group and kind of lost in the dark. They're on the run from Yoshie, trying to get free. And then we cut back to Kazuki, and he kind of has that hero moment go on of like, I gotta step up and finally do something about this. So he shaves, he cuts his hair, he goes back to looking like how he always looks. And he picks up his trusty camera, equips it with the big, like, supersized flashbulb he's been using in some of the earlier films. And he sets back out there to get into the mix on things, so... And this is where they kind of swerve, Yui being, like, the central lead, because... she's cornered, one of them is gonna get got, and she kind of just runs and, like, sacrifices herself to Yoshie so that Nase will be safe. So she gets, like, fully devoured by Yoshie, which then prompts Nanase to be able to see her fully, and then puts her on the run. It seems like she's not gonna get away, and that's when Kazuki shows up and uses his camera to repulse Yoshie and save her. So... Nanase kind of teams up with Kazuki, and they're one of the groups that's running about now trying to get a control on things. Our other survivor group, they're fleeing in the van that they hijacked. And I really like the smart guy, because he did this whole thing of like, he equipped himself with this like white bodysuit, and he's run like LED lights all over it. And so it's supposed to be kind of like a barrier that will always protect him if they get too close. And I forgot to talk about the idol dudes. They really tried to do a thing of like Yui and Sato kind of having a thing for one another. And so it's actually... he tries to like save them at one point, and he does it by getting up in the face of Yoshie with like his glow sticks and doing one of the like dances with them and doing the chants you would do along to like an idol song. Does not repulse her, that really just makes her stop for a little bit and be puzzled, but it was both a funny and kind of frightening scene. So Kazuki and Nanase run into the cops, they let them know what's going on, tells them to try to use like big bright lights to repulse the creatures, and that he is gonna go and look for like the old woman, because he suspects that she is somehow involved with how they've been able to get to Tokyo, because anytime he's seen them outside the forest, she has been lurking around somehow. So, a few different things happen. The cops like lose some of their numbers to the monsters. Our group that's fleeing, they make it to like a boat marina, and they have this idea that they're going to get on a boat and put out like deep into the water, because I think if they're just out in the middle of a body of water, there's no way any of the creatures can get to them. So they get out there and they think they're safe, and they kind of are having like a calm moment and reconciling. Kazuki is doing a bunch of research and kind of gets like a hunch, and they go and they come to the top of this one building, and on the top of the building they find the old woman, and she has these like, it's almost like a ritual altar that's been set up, and there's all these different candles on it, some that are burning, some that are not. And so Kazuki kind of confronts her and is, wanting to know what's going on and what she's doing. And again, she tells him just to, forget it and go away. But what he learns is that each candle represents a person, and when Yoshie or the stalkers kill them, the candle extinguishes. So it's almost some kind of like weird, creepy, dark ritual to, devour people. Which makes me wonder if this old woman, is she like some sort of occultist? Is she like malevolently like manipulating these creatures to do nefarious things, or like what? But so we notice there's about like some of the cops die, those candles extinguish, and then we've got about like 5 left. And so 4 of them obviously represent the 4 survivors on the boat. And despite thinking that they're safe, they try to take a photo together to commemorate their escape. And while the stalkers are deterred by water, Yoshie is not. And she swoops over there and comes down from above and like chomps them all in one go. So then there's 1 candle left. And it's Nanase and Kazuki. And he kind of has this realization like, oh, it must be me. I must be the final one because I've meddled for so long. And he just approaches, and Yoshie materializes in the sky above and comes down. And he kind of just relents. He's like, all right, you know what? Kill me, take me. This is the end of the road for me. I can't stop this. I give up. Spare this young girl. Let her at least have her life. And he kind of just opens his arms and shuts his eyes and resigns himself. And we get a cool, like, fade to black moment, and you hear the chomp. And then when it cuts back, all the candles are extinguished. The old woman has vanished. Kazuki's still standing there, and Nanase has been bitten in half. And her gore is, like, splayed out across the roof. And Kazuki, man, just, like, fucking breaks. Like, it's one of those things of, like, it felt like a Call of Cthulhu moment, and the tabletop RPG, and you're playing, someone hits 0 sanity. And it's that moment where they're totally broken and they'll never come back again. And they can no longer be a playable character in the game. And he just drops to his knees screaming and kind of crying at the same time. There's a little denouement that after that night, the creatures weren't spotted anymore in Shibuya. A few of the cops survive, so they kind of like make peace with everything that's going on. And then, yeah, Kazuki is just fucking destroyed. And then we get this really, like, it starts to go into the credits, and then we get like a little mid-credits like teasery thing where it cuts. We see Aokigahara. We're in the Death Forest, and it's Yui, and she wakes up and she's just suddenly in the middle of the forest for no reason, and she doesn't know why she's there, and she doesn't know how she got there. And it's like daytime, but it's kind of starting to get late, and nighttime is coming. And so immediately she's filled with fear because her first thought is like, oh, those creatures. And she notices laying beside her is the glow stick that Sato had. He was using to try to repulse Yoshie whenever he got killed. And she kind of picks that up and holds it very determinedly. And looks like she's going to start looking for a way out to escape. Which is a little bit of a puzzling mid-credits teaser. It does relate to something that came up when they have the big, like, everyone gets together, group convo, share all the lore. It wasn't anything that Kazuki had brought up, but the smart guy had a theory that whenever they were devouring people in Tokyo, it was like sending them to their domain, which would be the Death Forest. Because, like, that was how they were getting more victims, because not enough people were coming and stumbling across them. And so somehow, like, I guess through the support of the old woman and whatever occult stuff she was doing, it was like channeling more people to go there in like a supernatural means. Not the most satisfying resolution to everything, but it was a fun little teaser. And then we smash into the credits, and that's the end of the film, and presumably the end of this whole franchise, because they've never made another one since, and I don't know if it'll ever get revisited again, but man, this one was just like super duper fun, like just really enjoyable. A lot of great gore moments, a lot of great like J-horror scare moments. It looked good, it moved good, it had great pacing, even though it was longer, it really like moved about at a nice speed. Never felt that it lingered too long on anything or slowed down too much. Yeah, I was super impressed with it all across the board, and I think it's a weird situation where so rare is it that you would have a horror franchise and then say, like, okay, there's 5 films, and the 5th film is the best one. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Usually it's always the first one, Or like after the first one, they might have like the second one, or like, 3 or 4. Usually at that point, it's like where they hit the pinnacle. And I struggle to even think of one where I could say like, yeah, the fifth film is like fucking gold. I do like Friday the 13th Part 5, but it definitely, I mean, I can, even as someone that loves it, I can tell you it's lesser than other films in that franchise. So yeah, it's an interesting feat, and I think that's maybe owed to the directors involved, Yohei Fukuda and Yuka Tanaka. I think they just really came at it with a very fresh perspective and really gave it a lot of energy and a lot of fun. That was always kind of there as a thing you could do, but just, those decisions were never made along the way. Effects-wise, Yoshie's looks great. It's more of the feel of like a thing that's been filmed and then superimposed more than like the CG head. Sometimes it surely had to be a person. Sometimes it had to be like a puppet though, because like there was one really weird scene where like she opens her mouth wide, and as she opens her mouth, her teeth kind of like tilt out more, which surely had to be like a puppet type thing. But and whether intentional or not, it even made the moment like more creepy. So I wouldn't even knock them for the way it looked. Like it was just an interesting scene. And then yeah, I really appreciated too how they like incorporated the game. When they're doing the big info dump share, they even talk about the game, and they give it like a place in universe where they say like once these rumors spread online, someone read Kazuki's blog, and based on that blog, they made the video game. And so that was a fun little connecting piece. The review. In the range of all of these, I've given different scores out, and I think to date, my best one was the second one, which I give a 4. I do still think that one's really strong, but I do think also this fifth one is just so much better. It's got, better effects, better pacing, bigger ideas. It's just cool, man. So I would give this one like a 4.5. I can't go 5 because it is still, a low-budget J-horror film that at times some stuff doesn't quite work, or some of the effects are a little questionable at times, but definitely would have liked to have seen more gore, because really the first half of the film they do kind of fade out on a lot of the kills. But yeah, otherwise, man, like really solid film. I'm impressed. I never would have thought we would have crawled to the end and then that's the best one, but it is. But the one thing we never get is we never really get the backstory on Yoshie or the Stalkers or what's going on. So I thought to wrap up this little franchise and kind of bring it full circle, we're going to go back to the video game, and I was going to talk about some of the lore you can pick up there. So if you'll remember the plot of the game, you're playing as Kazuki. Your motorcycle breaks down in the forest while you're looking for your missing sister. And you have to collect different parts to repair it and get out of there while being pursued by the denizens of the Death Forest. And again, that's sort of just a slight remake of the concept of Slender the 8 Pages, a Slender Man video game that was really fun cash-in on the whole like Slender Man mythos before it got going super big. So in Death Forest, though, along with the parts for the motorcycle, there's also files you can find, like little documents that tell you stuff. And among them, they kind of piece together some history and some backstory on these entities and who they are and what's going on. So, all told, there's 13 of them, and I thought I would just run through them. The entries are very short, and I thought it would just give us some extra context on, like, the starting point of all of this. So, but yeah, each file, it gives a picture, and then it has some text accompanying it. And I'll link to, like, a wiki page that has, like, the images, so you can look at those if you're curious. But, starting with File 0, we're told, before he died, Kenji Omiya was 23 years old and single. He was working as a civil engineer. Now, the picture that's accompanied with that file is of one of the stalkers. So that seems to imply who one of the stalkers is. And then File 1 says Sudo and Kenji Omiya's families were close in the neighborhood. And that's again with a picture of one of the stalkers. So now we've been given these two characters, Sudo and Kenji. File 2 In 2013, for urgent business, Sudo and Yoshida drove a car. They tried to cross this forest, but the tunnel was a dead end, causing them to abandon it. It is currently unknown if he was attacked by Yoshie or the others. So Yoshida is our third character introduced in these files. She is seemingly a friend of Sudo and or Kenji. File 3. We get, before he died, Ren Sudo was 18 years old. He was a third-year student at the same high school as Yoshida. He's from the art club. Fleshing them out a little further. File 4. Ren had a cheerful personality. Yoshida and the members of the art club were all on good terms. File 5. He was driving with Kenji Omiya one summer day in 2013. They got out of the car and stepped into the forest. While running away from Yoshie, they were killed by something that is not Yoshie. File 6 depicts, and this is sad, this is one of the monsters from the game that never really made it into the films, Uma, which is unidentified mysterious animal. And that's kind of the one, it looks like a stalker, but like with very elongated arms and legs, and some creepy hair. But this file depicts that entity, and it says, Uma's current age is unknown. He lives in the old underground passageway at the back of a concrete maze. He may be there, or he may not. And then File 7 expands on that a little more, and says, the whole body is flesh-colored with no blood, and the head is also present. In addition, various parts of the body are very similar to those of humans. And then File 8 still depicts the Uma, but introduces us to another character, and it says Shin Ryugasaki was 20 years old and a worker. In 1998, an accident occurred in the tunnel near this forest. A few days later, Shin was killed. His body has been deformed over a long time, but is still alive. There are now no traces of him. So, that kind of seems to imply that like there was this earlier event in the 90s that happened, and this dude was killed, and then he somehow became the Uma entity. File 9. Chika Yoshida was 17 years old and a second-year high school student in the prefecture. Like Sudo, she is from the art club. File 10. She has a gentle personality and is very vulnerable to pushing. File 11. She entered the forest with Omiya and Sudo, and they encountered Yoshie. Omiya's car was destroyed without him knowing, and the way home was cut off by a storm. He was then stabbed in the back by something lurking in the woods and suffered severe injuries and fled. He hid in the locker in a shed. The cause of death was heavy bleeding. And then the final file depicts Yoshie and explains, before she died, Yoshie Kimura was 20 years old from the University of Fukui and was a member of the Outdoors Club. In 2007, she explored the area with her friends and found a forest cave and then disappeared. And so essentially these characters that are introduced in these files are all ones that became denizens of the forest, most of them stalkers. And it just gives you like, a scant little bit of their backstory, which Yoshida, she appears in the game as I guess you would call like a standard ghost. She's just like, she seems like a real person, but then she vanishes and you realize that her spirit's just kind of bound to the area. So, and I think that's something that's reflected in the way they all died, because for Ren and Kenji, they're clearly killed by one of the entities of the forest, Yoshie. For Chika, she got injured, but then hid somewhere and bled to death. So because of that, she sort of became like a spirit bound to that area, instead of becoming an actual, like, I guess you would describe these as like Onryo, probably. And there's a little more detail that you can pull out from the game about Yoshie. So like we said, she was a medical student in the Outdoors Club. And there's a little bit of lore you pull out where when they're in the forest, they found a cave. And Yoshie was killed by an unknown person. The killer beat her to death with a pipe until her face split open, creating her iconic permanent smile. So really, in the end, that kind of all goes back to like your most classic tropes of like a J-horror film, especially with ghosts involved, Someone died, it leaves a grudge behind. That grudge manifests into an evil, angry spirit. And that malevolence sort of continually reaches out for anyone it can find to pull in and devour. And then the movie, I guess, adds this interesting twist of like this malevolent individual who is like increasing the reach of this evil and this grudge to spread out to the neighboring areas and ultimately to Tokyo. So it is what it is. I don't think this is like one of the greatest like J-horror franchises of all time. It's not super amazing. It's not great. Definitely the fifth one is a fun watch. The second one I super enjoyed. 1, 3, and 4 is like, if you're committed, go ahead and watch them, but like you don't really need to. And even if you're just coming at these like blind, like I don't think you need the first one to appreciate the second or the fifth one. There's enough of a drop of like the general what's going on or what's happened in the past that like you're just gonna sink right in, and there's nothing super deep or super narratively connecting between them. I think these would be great for like someone to license and release. I don't know what the price would be. You know, I'm sure these were pretty low budget, and they clearly haven't had a lot of appeal or staying power. So I would love to see these get released one day. Probably never, but it is a shame too that they have such poorly composed subtitles. Whoever did them, but it is what it is. So we have finished the Death Force franchise. It is a Christmas miracle. And that's it. And where will we go next? I don't know. Probably some more just like standalone films, I think. So I'm not like super committed into like what we've just been through. But you know what? I'm going to say in the end, kind of worth it for this last one. Man, Death Force 5, pretty damn good. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I wish you all the best. I wish you a happy Christmas, happy holidays. Spend some time with the family. Do whatever it is you do that you enjoy at this time in the winter. Sit around the fire and tell some ghost stories. I think that's a nice way to spend the winter months. Or just enjoy some movies. I got a plenty that I need to check out. This weekend that I'm recording this, Sonic 3 is hitting the theaters. And you know my nerdy ass is going out to see that. So I'll probably definitely chime in on that the next time. But reach out to us, hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Instagram, email us at genreexposure@gmail.com, send us what you've been watching, what you're enjoying, what you think is cool, stuff we should check out, stuff we should be aware of, movies that you want us to cover. I don't know if I would do a listener request episode of this little spinoff thing, but I mean, if you send me names of cool J-horror films and I'm intrigued, I'll probably fucking do it, so think about that. Otherwise, you have been listening to Genre Exposure. Take care.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.